there, I'm Energy Green Grandpa. You know, this business of global warming and what we now call climate change, there seems to be a lot of hysteria about it, and a lot of the sky is falling and it's impossible to do anything about it. The world is coming to an end. Well, folks, there can be something to do about it. And I'll show you how you can play some role, at least in understanding what you can do. But I'm 84 years old, and I was in education for 48 years. I have a broad training in the sciences, biology, chemistry, physics, geology, and have taught all of the courses from the 18 years that I taught high school, and then all the rest was in college. Also, during that time, part-time, I was a consultant for environmental education and also a consultant dealing with environmental problems that we would have in our community and our state, because I had this background that was a broad background. And we had some problems we didn't think that we could solve, and I'll tell you more about those problems after I just take a look at what you can do to get an understanding of how you can solve the problem in your own state, or if you're out of the country, in your own province, of how you can deal with climate change in your own state. In other words, dealing with climate change is reducing down to, never will be down to zero of greenhouse gases, but close to zero of greenhouse gases. And I think that if you put together a plan, you can make big progress over 20 years. Now, I'm not going to be around looking for you. God and I will be looking down, and you see that you're doing a good job on this. But it can be done. And so let's take a look at what we have planned for Kansas. Every state and every province is going to have a summary of the sources of energy for that state or province. And every one of them has a pie chart like you see here. And the pie chart then tells you a lot about what's going on in your state as far as the number of greenhouse gases that are sources that you have, and also what the state is doing about other resources that can be developed. So let me put on my glasses here and take a look. You can see that the largest percentage of energy in Kansas comes from wind. Those of you that have been to Kansas are not going to be surprised at all. Some folks have told me that I make a major contribution to the wind in Kansas, but I ignore that. So we have wind we've been putting up for the last 20 years, wind generators in Kansas, the turbines. And they've done, it's 47.1% of our energy in Kansas comes from that. That's a positive. Now, what's next? Coal, 32.3%. That's a problem that we have to deal with, and we'll talk about that a little later on. And then what we have here is nuclear. And some people think, well, my gosh, nuclear, we don't want to do nuclear. We're going to blow up the state. I'll come back to why that's not going to happen, and I'll tell you a little bit what happened in Chernobyl and what happened at 3 Mile Island and what happened in the Japan earthquake. They were disasters, but they're not going to happen at your state or local nuclear plant. But they do have problems with those, and I've dealt with some of those in the past here in Kansas. Tell you something about that. Well, what do we have over here? That's nuclear. And then natural gas is about 5.75. And then we have petroleum, which is 0.3%. And then we have solar, 0.1%. Is that going to give us a challenge to solve the problem? You betcha. And then we have over here biomass. That's 0.1%. And I'll talk a little bit more about biomass. But biomass is a source of greenhouse gases, and we'll talk about that. So here we are. Kansas is making good progress. And you can take a look at the pie chart in your state or province, and you can see what kind of progress you're making on wind generation. You also see what kind of progress that you are making on nuclear. Nuclear, and this is getting to be a big thing now. We're looking, first of all, at wind then solar, then at nuclear as being the big three in solving the problem. So this then are things that are very important that you need to look at and what your percentages are. And you could take these percentages, find out what the total megawatts are produced or in the States, and you can get exactly the amount of energy each one of these things are produced just by a little bit of easy math. But for me, math has never been easy. So, and then we take a look at the other sources, natural gas and so on, and work on those. So, if you're a teacher, I would say this is a good challenge. This may be a kind of a week of a project that you can take your students in. And you can be a history teacher, you can be a science teacher, you can be PE teacher, whatever. But you want to get your kids involved. And I found that I was most successful when I was get kids involved. A lot of the problems with science teaching is that it is giving out information, remembering that information or putting it in your mind, and then regurgitating that information. I call it garbage in, garbage out. Because that information went through a process to become a valuable information, and that process is what we call a science process. So I spend most of my time with the students going through the process, even in anatomy, how they know all about the bones and the muscles and the veins and the arteries and so on, how they know about the process of quantum mechanics, what process they all kinds of things that you can go through is a process. Then you have the product. You don't emphasize the product, you emphasize the process so you understand how science works. So that's important.